But with this case today, we saw that the Russians, before they began the attack on those two unarmed civilians, they had shot most of the CCTV cameras, but then the generator kicked in and then the one came on. And so the prosecutor said that that is going to be the key evidence because it's like almost an independent source. And also you saw their intent of trying to destroy the cameras before and then destroy it after. So it, and I'm just very much hoping that the justice for the people of Ukraine and what has been done to their country will come, and when it does come.
We're reflecting today on the footage that has emerged of 2 Ukrainian civilians being killed by Russian soldiers after they were frisked for cigarettes. This is perhaps the most stark and obvious example of war crimes being perpetrated in Ukraine. Would you agree with that? Are you shocked by what we've seen?
I hate to say that I'm not shocked by what I've seen. I am just as disgusted, just as horrified, but I'm not as shocked. This has been a continuous trend we have seen with the Russian army, not just in the Ukraine, but also in Chechnya, in Syria. These are continuous tactics of the Russian army and their what, I'm no army military expert, but particularly because they're so vast. There's a lot of rumors about, one unit has gone rogue and therefore we do not have control over this. This was not an order given, etc., etc. So no, I'm not shocked, but I'm absolutely horrified, and the extent of the footage we have now is unlike what we have seen before.
In terms of your analysis of war crimes being perpetrated, is this symptomatic of rogue soldiers within the Russian military? So even if there wasn't a specific order given, how does this work from the Russian armed forces point of view? Do they just do what they want? So
this is, and I say this from a professional standpoint, not a personal standpoint. Obviously, from a personal standpoint, I go with most of the population saying these people should be tried, prosecuted, to the fullest extent of the law. But unfortunately, if this ever made it to an international criminal tribunal or the ICC, it would be on the prosecutors to prove. Unfortunately, like any trial we see, be it national or international, it's on the prosecutors to prove that this was an order given, that this was a systematic and continuous warfare strategy by the army and not just a rogue state. However, with that said, the ICC have already said regarding this exact case that they are prosecuting it, and that we say possible war crimes only because they haven't been convicted. The only reason people say possible war crimes, as you would know, in the media, is because it's not. There's been no conviction. It's not that we disbelieve that what we're seeing, is a war crime. However, something that I always like to note too, my students teaching international law, and also my time working at the Khmer Rouge tribunals, in Cambodia, we need to acknowledge that international law is always evolving. That it's not the Bible, it's not the Torah, it's not the Quran, it's not something that, was handed down to us, whether, you believe it in those works or not. We all acknowledge that international law was created by man, for man, woman, and woman, but it's evolving. At first, you would have never heard of such a thing as the Nuremberg tribunals, but they happened. Take, for example, rape as a weapon of war. It wasn't until 2002, I believe, and please, listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, 2002 or 2008, that the UN actually said that this was a crime against humanity. Until then, it was actually just seen as a spoil of war. So international law is always changing, always evolving, and we must acknowledge our power that even if this is a rogue unit, international law can change and can prosecute these rogue units. So, just because that incident, the prosecution or the defendants may say it's a rogue unit. International law can change and evolve.
That is interesting. And I suppose it's interesting because immediately one wonders if it is about prosecuting individual soldiers who perpetrate such actions. And we know that this is becoming reasonably widespread, actually, in the war in Ukraine. So whether it's about prosecuting individual soldiers, whole units, or even further up the military chain of command, how does that work in international law right now?
Well, yeah, not to guess. We'll be here for like 5 days, and you'll be like, "Please stop talking. Please cut her off." One of my favorite. She's a political philosopher, Hannah Arendt. She essentially she escaped Nazi Germany, and she viewed and observed the Eichmann tribunals, but she's written these phenomenal works called The Origins of Totalitarianism and also the Bureaucratization of Evil. And when the Nuremberg tribunals were being created, she was there and was also consulting on it. And she argued that everyone should be tried because they were, and I agree with this argument that, if some people say, I was just the person on the platform, I just put them on the train. And this is the same with the Khmer Rouge, the tribunals that I dealt with. I was just the person that drove the train. I was just the person that divided the people into lines in the camp. But her argument is, well, without those cogs in the machine and without the actual bureaucratization of evil, the bureaucracy of this, just because someone gave an order from the top, it would have never happened. And so, it's not, I'm not saying this is like a magic solution where it's completely feasible to prosecute all these people, but that's why we saw what was quite different with the Nuremberg tribunals, that a lot more of the SS and the top generals were tried than any other tribunals we've seen. But I would be of the notion that, prosecute as many as you can, because I know there are orders from the tops. I know there are what I call the band of brothers who carry out the things, but you have this bureaucratization of evil, and everyone is a cog in a machine, so to speak, and people do have free will and choice. So
it's a really interesting concept, that the bureaucratization of evil. I wanted to note as well that Ukrainian prosecutors have documented more than 10,700 war crimes that they hope to bring to trial. That the scale of this is almost unimaginable. And in terms of trying to process that number of war crimes in any court and in any process is going to take such a long time. Is that realistic?
Yeah, and so just to note there that they're just war crimes. So the ICC, and that's another discussion regarding Russia not being signed up to the a signature to the ICC. But let's just put that aside for one moment. But the ICC prosecute war crimes, in which there are like a core 30 documented under that, of which we're talking about, civilians, rape and weapon war, all of which we discussed, and you're saying 10,700. But what we also have crimes of aggression, we've genocide, very, extremely hard to prove by the definition that the court holds, and you crimes of aggression, and that these fact-finding missions take much longer. But so I've no doubt, though, that the ICC, if it gets to the ICC, that this will, it won't just be war crimes that have that will be prosecuted. These other core tenets of the ICC will be done. But let's just say it's war crimes just being prosecuted. Let's just look at that. Yeah, the question, how on earth? I've been asked this many times over, and I wish I just had this 3-line answer, and then I could say, well, if I had a 3-line answer, I think I'd be at The Hague now, just telling everyone, and be like, job closed. No one has this. It is almost. It's not that it's impossible. it's not certainly it's not impossible to prove war crimes, particularly in the age of technology, which is, along with the international war and war crimes, tech and cyber warfare is my other area of study. So, this is something we've never seen. But the time and the length it takes to prosecute, and again, we're even discussing this in the context if you can even prosecute, Russia, and the time, the fact-finding missions, the time it takes, the former tribunals for Yugoslavia, they took 10 years. We've seen other cases take 20 years. The Khmer Rouge tribunals, Cambodia asked for help in 1997. The court wasn't established in 2003, and it just ended. And there was 5 people tried, and by the time it ended, they were all dead, the defendants, because of their age, except for one who died a year later. So most, and I'm not generalizing here about dictators, but I don't think that's an issue, generalizing dictators. Well, it could be for people, I don't know. Usually of the older age category, dictators, just simply by, moving up the ranks. So by the time you indict, by the time you have a fact-finding mission, by the time you have the trial, it is extremely long. These people are of very old age, and some don't even make it, to the thing. So yeah, long and arduous. But one point I will just point out there, and one that changed my view on this notion of, like, then why on earth would we have these tribunals? Having witnessed it in Phnom Penh so much, I came back and I wrote a letter to Brussels. I was working for the EU diplomatic service, and I said, we're putting so much money into this, this is going on for so many years. There's no prosecution. I'm not seeing it. This was years, I don't want to say naive. I just didn't have the experience. And the ambassador came down to me and said, well, look, he's like, I read your report. But he's like, I read your report, and I just want to ask you, how full is that courtroom every single day? And I was like, well, it is a 1,000-seat courtroom. It's full every single day. It's like, how long is that queue for the free buses from Phnom Penh to the tribunal every day? And I was like, hours long. He's like, yes, it mightn't be the perfect tribunal, but it is the only place that people get to hear their stories, hear what has happened to their families, actually see some accountability, even if it's not perfect. And that's not saying that, okay, it's not perfect, end of story. We learn from that, we'll deal with it, we see how to progress and move on. As it says, international law changes, how can we make it better? But also it is about the people, and it's not just that, we can't do it great, so why do it at all? That kind of.
I get you. Just as a final reflection then, Jennifer, I want to just tie in your areas of expertise that you just mentioned there in terms of cyber and war crimes, as we're talking about now. It is unprecedented, is it not, this war in Ukraine, because we have so much real-time footage, documentary evidence, photographs, live testimony being tweeted in the middle of attacks and raids and everything. Just in terms of what we are experiencing with a view to getting justice, is there some confidence from you and from your peers that actually that is remarkably helpful, and this is a real moment of change in terms of being able to use that evidence that we're gathering just by virtue of the world in which we live to prosecute from here on out?
Yeah. Well, short answer, yes, certainly. It is extremely helpful. We've never seen a war documented to this extent in real time. My PhD actually was on it was on how diplomats use social media during times of political crisis. And it just happened to be when on the 21st November 2013, when the Euromaidan movement began in Ukraine. That's what I looked at in real time, and I thought this will never be looked at again. So I have every single tweet and Facebook post from every embassy and foreign ministry, and also attack from 21st November 2013 to 4 months after the annexation of Crimea. And I thought, SEAL's done. And then, this came back. But the difference and the speed and the change of technology, even in those, like, I don't say my PhD is redundant. I won't put that out there. But I look back, I'm like, okay, well, it makes some good points, but regarding the speed of technology, and regarding the fact-finding mission, no, we've completely moved on. But one point I will note in this, which I heard the ICC prosecutor note, which I thought was both disturbing and interesting, because I hadn't thought of it before. We saw a lot of course, we see a lot of Ukrainians filming these attacks. And again, I look at them personally and think, this is a war crime. How could anyone not think this is a war crime? However, what the prosecution are looking for, and what's actually unique in this case that we were discussing today, is that they need the filming of the war crime really to be done by the aggressor, because the prosecution or the defense could say this in some way could be tampered with by the Ukrainians, which it's something that I hadn't thought about. But with this case today, we saw that the Russians, before they began the attack on those two unarmed civilians, they had shot most of the CCTV cameras, but then the generator kicked in and then the one came on. And so the prosecutor said that is going to be the key evidence, because it's like almost an independent source. And also you saw their intent of trying to destroy the cameras before and then destroy it after. So and I'm just very much hoping that the justice for the people of Ukraine and what has been done to their country will come, and when it does come, technology will play a massive role. And we've never seen, the final point here is, we've never seen the ICC come in real time and just be simply given the evidence. And of course they're looking at it for themselves and going around. But it's I don't want to say a phenomenal asset, because you never want this to happen. But technology has certainly in so many ways transformed not only the war crimes aspect, fact-finding mission, but just the war in general.